Hello, I'm David D. Cosmo. Welcome to ECTV Live. I'm joined by my co-host, Rusty Fender.
Good to see you, David.
Good to see you as well. Rusty, we're going into the cemetery again now. You know, that time of year is approaching when people think about cemeteries in terms of ghosts and goblins. Well, this is just a little bit different, although the cemetery is still the stage.
There's one across from my house, and they're the best neighbors you could ever have. Let me tell you.
Julie Esty joins us again.
Hi, Julie.
Julie's
Hi.
with the Dearly Departed Players, and every year for quite a few years now. How long?
This is my 20th year.
20th
Wow.
year. This group escorts people. Well, I'll let her tell you where and when this year. But this is not looking for ghosts, although there may be a few lingering around. And there certainly are a few stories that are lingering around. Julie, where is the tour? When is the tour?
The tour is in the Dunmore Cemetery on Warren and Church Streets in Dunmore, Pennsylvania. And we will be there October 1st and 8th. With tours starting at 2 p.m. Folks need to arrive early, though, so that they can visit with the folks that we're going to have exhibiting with us this year.
Okay, now you're going to have people that haven't heard about this at all before, that haven't seen our show before.
Right, bring us up to speed.
Never heard of the Dearly Departed Players, that are saying, why am I going to go to a cemetery?
The Dearly Departed Players are a group of 14 area residents. I've been out there 20 years. Many of the others are there 14 years. What we do is we take you on an awesome walk through history. The history of this valley. You will start at the cemetery gate, and you will meet costumed interpreters on your way through who tell you amazing stories from this area's past. They're all historically researched. You know, they're true stories. Some are funny, some are sad, some are, I did this, whatever, but we're definitely not a lecture. And we are now reaching people all over the United States that are coming to this 2-hour tour.
Wow, so you're getting response from more than just our own environs.
Yeah, in fact, my phone has started ringing. I got calls from Florida already, Mississippi. There are people that travel a route, and they go to different haunts, and there are some that go to different cemetery tours throughout the country. And we've managed to land on that because every year our quality has gone up and up.
And every year you alter if I can call it the theme, I guess. I mean, it's all historical. Your members reenact some, certainly stories of those departed that you're talking about. What is the theme this time around?
The theme this year is guest appearances. I was the fortunate recipient of a Lackawanna County Arts and Culture grant.
Great
Yep.
Organization that
Yes.
funds some very worthy efforts,
Yes.
and certainly this is one.
So since they funded me this year, instead of just doing people who are buried in the Dunmore Cemetery, I threw the cemetery gates open. This year it is Death's Playhouse, and we have invited people from the past from many other cemeteries throughout the valley into the Dunmore Cemetery to tell their stories this year.
Okay, so an example I can think of right offhand would be John Mitchell, the famous labor leader, who's buried, I think, in Cathedral
Yes, he is.
Cemetery. So not that he's on the list this year, but potentially you might have someone representing him in the Dunmore Cemetery that you're telling his story about how he dealt with
Right.
the labor, big coal strike
Right.
and everything. Okay.
Potentially we could have him, but we don't.
Okay, well, I thought I'd mention it. Who knows?
Yeah.
He may come back.
Yes, he is. He's definitely up there. What I usually do is pick people who are off the beaten path. A lot of people are very familiar with the usual run-of-the-mill folks that you have here. I pick people who are lesser known and have great stories to tell, because you know what? None of us are really all that famous, but we have great stories to tell. And because of some of the things, in fact, the one thing that's really nice this year is one of our departed who will be showcased this year was a Scranton firefighter.
Ah.
And in fact, he was one of the first, if not the first, paid fireman on the county, on the city rolls. And he was injured a number of times, in the line of duty. And then finally he gets hurt really, really bad around 1909. And he can't go back to work fighting fires. So what he does is he volunteers at the Center Street Police precinct, which Center Street is running right behind us here. He volunteers to take care of the hobos, the vagrants, the street people, the transients that are coming into this station. And what this man does, because he's a single man, he's now on pension because after he got hurt the last time, he couldn't go back to work. So he volunteered, he took care of these street people or hobos, whatever you want to call them. Back then, that's what they called them.
Right.
He started feeding them at Thanksgiving. And he starts out with like a handful of guys, but then it blossoms into Christmas, and then it ends up to be 40 people, and he's feeding them out of his own money, and he doesn't live much, he only lives 3 years after that, but for the time that he's alive, he does this. So it's kind of the precursor of what we have going on here now with the holidays for folks who need that. So in this firefighter's memory, we've partnered with Feed a Friend.
Oh, yes, okay.
And we're asking people to bring a donation of a non-perishable to the
That's
cemetery
a great
gates.
idea. Where do you get a lot of your fodder from? Do you go back to the old microfilm and things like that? to get these-
Everywhere.
Yeah, sure, of
It
course.
comes from everywhere.
It's as much fun doing the research probably as it is putting on the actual costumed play.
Yes, it is. It's always the thrill of the
Absolutely.
hunt. Who are you
It is.
going to find next that's going to have done wonderful things that you can use to, like this wonderful man from the past?
Sure.
You know, hopefully we will all be remembered in such a wonderful way 100 years from now. And we think this non-perishable drive is going to be quite successful.
And because the tour itself, you don't charge, do you?
No, we don't.
So that's free.
No.
So if you want to,
The tour is always free.
Non-perishable for the Feed a Friend is, an extra added attraction for them, but there's no cost to come and see this present. Now it's a walking presentation.
Yes.
So you're at various locations throughout.
Yes.
It's a big cemetery.
Oh, yes, the tour
Sure
takes
is.
about 2 hours. People walk, and then you get a stop, and then you walk a little bit further, and you get a stop. We now have people bringing chairs, so they carry their chair. We also have people who come, and if they can't make the whole walk in one day, they will do the front half of the tour, and then leave, and then the next week they come back,
For the second.
and they do the back half of the tour.
Oh,
So it
that's-
works out very, very well.
Sure.
And again, this year we have Coons Classic Memories volunteering. They come from Williamsport. And they have a hearse and horses, and they take the tour through. This year, I believe they're bringing a beer wagon instead of a hearse. So beer wagons are always good.
Certainly. That'll attract even more.
Yeah, so
think
that's a
we're-
win situation right there.
Yeah,
with a
I don't
beer
think they'll
wagon.
have beer on the back of it, but it really would be nice now, wouldn't it?
It would indeed. And following on what Rusty asked about, I often wondered, do you go into the cemetery and look for a tombstone and say,
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's Jack Smith. Now, maybe I better go and look him up. How do
That's
you?
a great
That,
question.
that
I'll
is
bet
how
you do.
that is actually how
Sure.
it started.
No doubt.
That is
That's a great
actually how it
question.
started. 20 years ago, I was sitting out there. I've spent the better part of my life out there for one reason or another. And 20-some years ago, I was sitting out there and I just looked at a stone and it's like, why are you here? What's your story? So I wanted to find out. So I went and I looked. Well, from one, you get another, you get another, you get another, and then it's not just Dunmore, now it's Forest Hills, it's Cathedral, it's St. Catharines. So, like, there's file cabinets of folders at home.
But it's tough because that era wasn't that well documented as it is now, with microfilm on computer and microfilm on 35 millimeter film 20 years ago. It was tough back then with handwritten ledgers.
You know
and
how to
journals.
look, though. Sometimes I think their records are going to survive what we're
Is
putting
that a
out there
fact?
now.
Yeah, no doubt. How about?
Gotta know how to look.
And of course, there were more newspapers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
More
Absolutely.
newspapers, if you can find and dig out the records. Now, Joe Clapatch, an old colleague of mine, has been very successful in doing that in terms of researching the history of local fire departments. So he undoubtedly has come across the gentleman that you told us about. And one of the things that fascinates me every year and yet has me a little concerned when I have you come on is you don't want to give away the whole plot and all the stories you're going to see. And I understand that. So I was determined this year I'd ask you maybe about something you did last year that you can tell us about. And
What did we do last year?
Yes, now you forgot what you did already.
You know what? When you're doing it, it's just, what was that? Was it the Criminal Intent Tour?
I believe so.
Notice he said cemetery. He said plot of
we've
last year.
done-
Plot cemetery. That was a good.
Yeah.
That was a good play on words.
That was a good day.
We've spotlighted crime, accidents, just your regular. We've had
Yeah, there was accidents, because you
Accidents.
mentioned.
yeah,
That's right,
we
it was
had a lot of
accidents.
accidents. The things that happen to people, and it's interesting because back then, you know, accidents can be much different than what we have going on now.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to look at, I mean, the number of people who would have get hit by cars when they first came out.
Sure.
You're
You know,
right.
You
Sure.
didn't
You
have.
didn't even know what that machine
yeah,
was.
what is
Sure.
this? They're
Yeah.
not following speed limits. We don't have traffic lights
That's
and
right.
things like that. You know, it's a newfangled invention.
That's right.
So then you have the whole group of people who ended up being stuck on railroad tracks and cars, you know, because something went wrong.
Exactly.
They're not really, you know, trains coming,
You're always
because
talking
then there
about
were
the
more
Laurel
trains
line.
coming.
They have the third rail?
Non,
The third rail?
non-covered. If you
The third
didn't
rail.
know that that third rail was electrified,
Yep.
people, I mean, my father's father, my grandfather, lost a couple of hunting dogs who put
Yes.
a foot up on the third rail back in the woods. People did not know that back in the middle of nowhere that rail was electrified. They stepped on it.
So I
It
would
was
bet you
terrible.
probably lost some lives.
Absolutely.
In fact, I considered putting the third rail on this
See
year's
that?
tour.
That's a
I have a
great
young
idea,
lady
Dave.
who, she was at Rocky Glen, and when her and her friend left, they ended up. This young lady was running down the tracks, and she ended up making contact with the third
No doubt.
rail. And what happened was the Laurel line then came and hit her.
Oh,
Fortunately, like
double-
the third rail made
Yeah,
sure
you're-
she never
you
knew
were
what hit
done.
her. But she really got a double whammy with that.
That's a great suggestion because it led to the 1930s of building the pantographs,
Yeah.
which was above the track, which led to a lot of non-lethal. There was no third rail; they eliminated. They put it above with the pantograph
Yeah.
that followed the trolley line.
And forgive me for those that don't follow it all that carefully, but the third rail was the two rails that you think of the train running on that, the track, and there was another track, but that track carried electricity. So were you to touch that and then touch a ground,
That's exactly, and it was 440 volts
Yep.
at like 150 amps. So
Yeah.
before
When-
you could scream, you were dead.
but
When
there
it
you have
first
a
started,
story right
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
When it first started, people educated their children about it, and then they kind of got complacent. And then accidents started happening again. And I have to say, I remember my father talking about the third rail to me and saying things. Now, it was probably gone maybe by the time, I don't know.
52 it ended. 52.
Then it was just my
So, yeah,
father telling
exactly.
me out of
Yep.
fear. One of those parent
Yeah.
dangers, like, you got to watch this.
Exactly.
But the third rail was a very big thing, and I did consider putting that on the tour. One thing that is on the tour this year is a whole family who died due to the effects of coal gas in their house.
Ooh.
That's another thing. Like,
Yeah.
one of my cast members
Good
who lives
idea.
down south said, who grew up down south, said, we had never heard of this.
Sure.
You know, so if you live in another area
Sure.
of the country, you might not be familiar with this. Imagine a whole family. So it's a very interesting little talk about how this could happen. We have a man. Another thing that was quite common back in the day, whether people wanted to admit it or not, was the fear of being buried alive.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a man who talks about the provisions he left in his will. So the extents he wanted his family to take to be certain
Wow.
that he was
Things you
not-
laugh at now
Yeah.
were real, honest to goodness, facts
a fear.
of life back then.
Yeah.
And as you say, every person that's buried in that cemetery,
Has a story.
they have a story. And I remember, I don't know if it was Dunmore or on a cemetery adjacent to it, I'm not sure, perhaps you'll know, that I was surprised one Memorial Day. We had sons of Union
Yeah.
veterans
They're exhibiting
doing
with
the
us this year.
ceremony,
Yeah.
and they had a Confederate flag with them because there was
Oh
a
yeah,
Confederate
he's over
soldier
in-
buried
he's
there.
over in-
How
yeah.
about that?
Now-
In fact, we're putting a Confederate sympathizer on this year's tour, who was very instrumental. In fact, he's very, very well connected to this corner, and he's got his, story to tell and his commentary on some of the things that are going on today in the country. So that's another thing. We also relate.
It's very
many of
pertinent with
them.
the taking down of the statues
Yes,
because,
yes.
like who's next?
But
Washington?
He was from
because,
Scranton, very well known, very well connected, very, very wealthy.
Sure.
And very, very, like I said, very connected to this specific corner, and he was a Confederate sympathizer. So he's going to be out there, and he's going to
Yeah,
discuss.
I think one of the things that's kind of important to note with regard to the controversy you just mentioned is that the one place where they don't seem to be questioning the monuments is in cemeteries.
Yeah.
And, rightfully so.
Rightfully so. You're right.
But I'm amazed now. As you're going through the tour, I asked you once before. I believe you said you do have some sort of a sound system for the people.
Oh, this year we are finally totally wireless, the whole Bluetooth. They are going to be
that's
able to hear
great.
us over at the high school.
That's great.
I've done something very interesting that I don't know if people will really grasp, but I've done something very interesting with the route. They need to be aware of the directions that they're walking, and they also need to be aware, because hidden within the tour is a very nice tribute to classic rock, because I can. There was a way to work it in.
Okay.
So in addition to the whole history deal that they're getting this really cool artsy kind of thing to go. The tour is many, many layers. So they just, people need to be aware. It's not just about what you're seeing in front of you. You need to really listen to what these people are saying to you, because sometimes all of it isn't just as cut and dry as you think it is. There's other things that go along with it. And the route is very, very, very interesting, the pattern that the route is taking.
Yeah. I am always interested in anything involving history, as is Rusty. I wish that some of the local teachings were a little
You're
more
right.
extensive
Yeah.
than
They used to be.
We're both on the same
Yeah,
page as far
yeah.
as history, no
But
doubt
now,
about it.
But given that, pardon me, given that thought, and given the fact that you're going in a cemetery, and I almost always open up by saying, well, this is not a ghost tour. Have you ever thought about doing a ghost tour?
I wouldn't really have to do a ghost tour if I just told the really funky, off-the-wall, true stories that I have accumulated, because sometimes
Because the facts are stranger than fiction.
sometimes
right?
reality
Absolutely.
is actually scarier than fiction. In fact, one of the part that I have this year is a lady of the evening who came to a very bad death just through the court. And the circumstances surrounding her death and the woman that she was with, they're horrifying. It's not a scary talk, but it took the police a month to figure out what happened. And, sometimes reality is really, really scarier than what. So as far as ghosts, like, why? Speaking of ghosts, though, I do have to say, one of the exhibitors that's going to be out there with us before the tour starts, we always have people from the community. We are going to have the Friends of the Forgotten join us. The Sons of Union Veterans, GAR Memorial Association will be out there. Scranton Reads, because the book they picked this year is very relevant to cemeteries. We're going to have the folks from East Coast Paracon
Oh, yeah.
out
yeah,
there.
Yeah.
They've got a sizable event coming up, and the Pittston Historical Society will be joining us. So people do need to come early to
Great.
see.
They were
the
just on with
exhibit.
us from the historical.
It's getting to be a
That's-
really,
yeah.
not only is it a historical event, it's artistic, it's cultural. And we're showing this cemetery to be community friendly. It's culturally significant. We are drawing people from all over the United States at this point, and it's just a good deal in the cemetery.
It's good that you keep, that one thing, it's like a link. One thing snowballs into another. And I think that David's idea for next year for the third rail and all the electrocution deaths of the lower
God.
line is something
Some
definitely to look into.
Some
That's a
people
fact.
actually did survive that, because as I said, I was going to put that talk on, and I researched it out pretty well. There were a few, in fact, I have a few within, I'd say maybe a 6 or 8 block radius of my home in Southside that survived it
about
with
that?
severe burn. They were extremely lucky.
You're not kidding.
Severely burned. The one young man that I put on the tour this year that I absolutely love, who would be so relevant to this area, he lost an arm hopping trains at a
Okay.
young age.
Oh, big time.
And he goes on to be an express delivery man down here. And because of what he does downtown, he becomes very physically fit. And he goes on, what people don't realize is that roller skating and endurance competitions were huge, the late 1800s, early 1900s. And this young man goes on to do his sport at Madison Square Garden out in Chicago, across the
interesting.
Stroud. Now imagine he's roller skating and doing these endurance events with one arm
arm.
at such a high rate of speed going around turns the balance issue
You're
that
right.
he might have there.
Sure.
But in his lifetime, it's estimated that he traveled around the world 12 times with the number of miles that he
Now
did.
that's interesting.
Now, if you expand and include Luzerne County cemeteries, you would
Ah.
then probably be bringing in Pete Gray, who lost his arm
That's
in
correct.
a train accident
Yep.
and
That's
became
correct.
a professional baseball player, pitcher. Now, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not he would have been in the pros had World War II not
You're right.
not been
That's
happening.
exactly right. Yeah, it
But
was a break for
nonetheless,
him.
he did make it. So here again, as you say, it's everybody's got their story.
Everybody's got a story.
The question, the challenge is to dig it out.
Find
And
them.
is there, pardon me, you do try to link one central theme. So if you pick 7 different graves out, you've still got to have stories that are somewhat related in terms of theme.
But I'm doing this 20 years. You know how many file folders there are with really cool people in who did really cool things, and like if you play with the file folders enough in your in the file cabinet in your
They
head,
come together.
you can link them
Yeah.
all together.
No
I mean,
doubt.
the young gentleman with the endurance events. When I started this 20 years ago, he was the first person that I wanted to put on a tour.
Ah.
But because he's buried in the Pittston Avenue Cemetery, I couldn't put him on. So it's taken 20 years for me to be able to put this young man on and tell his story.
Well,
because
that expansion, I think, is a wise thing. And yet, the fact is, there are so many buried in the Dunmore Cemetery that you could probably just use it
Yeah,
as your
forever.
template forever.
Forever.
You're right.
But there really are good people elsewhere. Every cemetery has amazing people. All of us, everyone who's out
Yeah,
there, is
yeah.
amazing. Everybody
And you
has
hear
a story
about
to
some
tell.
of them. And you may have heard about that Confederate buried in Dunmore. Certainly, you've now heard about Florence Foster Jenkins,
Yes,
buried in Wilkes-Barre,
Yep.
who was the young daughter of a coal magnate who went on to a singing career that was actually laughable, and yet she became very
was-
famous
Exactly.
in terms
Yes.
of the humor she ran. Meryl Streep played her in the movie by
movie.
that same name, Florence Foster Jenkins. So, but those are the kind that they're outstanding. There are some stories in these places we all know about,
Yeah.
but they are, as you say, I'm sure some of the names in that cemetery, in the Dunmore Cemetery, reflect the names of communities around
Oh,
here.
yeah. Yeah, you have them all. Simpson, Taylor, now if in fact those communities are named after those specific people, that's, remains to be seen. But yeah, when you walk through the Dunmore Cemetery, you do see how it was here and what Scranton was and what the Lackawanna Valley was. And it is the movers and the shakers and Millionaires Row. And, yeah, they're great. But we've done those. And we all know about those. The goal of this event is to showcase the regular person who has an amazing story.
It's a great concept, and everybody loves good show prep.
And
That's the bottom line.
We
right?
get asked to be, yeah, and
Yeah.
we get asked to be in other cemeteries all the time. But how do we take that huge audience and go somewhere else and say, this year we're here, this year we're there?
Well,
and get
maybe
them
could
this
you
way?
cultivate another audience and diverse? I mean, that's also a good thing too. You don't want to start with one McDonald's. You want to go for
You branch out and be everywhere.
Just
But
franchise this. There you
think-
go.
I think, though, that the Dunmore Cemetery has now become the stage.
Yeah,
Yes, it
Right,
is.
20 years.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
become the
And the
Palladium or the Palace of
Yes,
You're right.
and the neighbors are wonderful about it. We can't thank them enough because they always say, people are parking here, but we don't care because it's 2 days a year. And you're bringing positive publicity into this area.
You're right.
The businesses are very grateful because, when people get done, they're going
gotta
out
go
to
and
eat.
eat.
They,
Sure.
they need gas. We have people that are, the hotels, the people, and I have to thank the county, many different county departments. The Visitors Bureau has been wonderful. Arts and Culture has been wonderful. The Mayor's office here in Scranton has been wonderful.
And you got every business in the world
Yeah.
on the O'Neill Highway right
The
there.
Dunmore
so it's like
Police
great. You're right.
Department, wonderful. Everybody is just wonderful. The cooperation that we get. to make this tour what it is. I mean, we're now seeing like 2,000 people over
Of course,
2 weeks.
I do,
incredible.
You're doing your part. You know,
and I do
everybody's.
my regular plea, though, too, saying, gee, you have it this day and that day. I'd like to see it 2 days here and 2 days there.
We would like to do it. Eventually, we
Is it
think
possible?
that that's what. Eventually, we think that that's what's going to happen. I'm trying to hold off as long as I can.
Sure.
But
Really,
I think
yeah.
what's
Because
going
it's a
to
lot of
happen-
work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
My house looks like a bomb went off right now. Because I'm still costuming. I do all the costuming for it. You know, the research, the writing, the directing. I do have a great deal of help from my daughter now, Megan, who graduated from the University of Scranton with a theater degree. But it,
And you must start right after the 1 year is finished.
yes, as soon as one is done, the next one starts to roll. We have, the dearly departed players have been out in the cemetery since the middle of July, rehearsing. And every one of them has their own specific little niche that they're really good at. Nelson is like our sound wizard. You have Wendy, who has a knack for finding sewing supplies. You know, and then we have friends who help us. You know, I might say, look, I'm looking for this prop. It's a funky kind of thing. We have friends that are it's just like magic. Like they'll just find what we need. You know, so that's how it goes.
I think it's a great effort, and again, I'm being a lover of history, and now being able to see it sort of reenacted in that way, it just really is impressive. So before we go, one more time, the dates and times for this year's performances.
We will be in the cemetery on October 1st
Dunmore
and 8th.
Cemetery.
Dunmore Cemetery, Warren Street and Church Street, right there, a little up from Dunmore High School. We will start the tours at 2 o'clock. People should arrive early to see exhibitors. We suggest that they wear comfortable walking shoes. And it's always a wonderful day in the cemetery.
And it is absolutely free. They are asking you to bring a food donation for
Yes,
Feed a Friend this
right.
year. But otherwise, you know, come over
We're free.
and enjoy it and learn something about our local history while you're doing that. Julie Espy, thank you so much for
Thank
Julie.
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
And Rusty Fender, thank you for...
See you in the cemetery, David.
Mark
We'll
Glory,
see ya.
thanks for keeping
Sounded
us in
right.
focus. I'm
Thanks,
David
Mark.
DeCosmo for ECTV Live, so we see you again next week. Here's hoping all your news is good.